All right, so welcome. This is going to be hopefully a place where coaches and athletes alike can learn some of the things that I've learned as a sprint coach or as a strength conditioning coach that specializes in sprint training. I'm going to give you some of my background here in a moment. The goal for this video series is personally for me, I want to get used to talking in front of a camera more, sharing my philosophies and sharing my coaching practices with more of a public audience, so I can get critiqued. I can make changes. I can see other people's point of view, and we hopefully it's constructive when we can bounce ideas off of each other. And if you're an athlete that's just learning or curious about sprint training and how to get yourself faster, I'm here to help you as well. And if there's something that you need help with, or a certain aspect of what I'm talking about doesn't make sense and you feel like you'd want to know more about it, feel free to reach out to me, Nate@tpstrength.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at Coach Nate G. And then on TP Strength's Instagram, TP_strength. So with all that being said, this is episode number 1. I'm going to get better at the setup, if you will. But the goal is I'm going to be taking some notes on the iPad like I like to do with my voiceovers for videos. Hopefully you guys can pick that up pretty good. And then behind me, which I got to figure out a better way to do this, but we're going to be talking specifically about a high school baseball athlete who's a middle infielder. 2+ years of training experience. I've worked with him for the last 2+ years. We're specifically going to be talking about mid to late acceleration. Now, I don't try to obsess over the naming of the phases anymore because it gets too confusing. And some people think, early accel is this and mid accel is that, and late. Some people don't even include mid acceleration. So for the purposes of my philosophy and the context that I'm trying to give you guys, and I'm going to try to give you guys as much context as I can because I feel it's very important. I will define the phases as we go, but in general, I use starts as early accel. I use early accel for the first 3 to 5 steps. I use a transition phase into mid accel, around the 10 to 15 yard mark, maybe 20, depending on the context of the situation. Then we have late acceleration, which is going to be reaching towards your top velocity or terminal velocity or your top speed. And then from there, you're looking at holding top speed. And then some people classify it as speed endurance, the later part of the sprint. And then that steady decline as you start to fatigue. And that's a little bit more applicable towards the track athletes out there. So for us, we're spending a lot of time in acceleration, primarily because, one, I work primarily with field-based sports. Not a lot of track sprinters come through my door, and not a lot of soccer or lacrosse athletes I have a ton of experience working with over the last few years. A handful here and there, but also our facility is a big facility. It's very nice, Total Performance, Mount Kisco, New York. You have a legitimate testable 20-yard sprint lane. You go outside, you can rip a 40. So all that being said, like the stuff I usually work on the most is starts, early accel, and then mid to late accel. When we're able to get outside when it's warm, like it is now, like it is in May, and we start having guys come through the door again, we'll be getting outside a little bit, but it's also on asphalt and we don't have a ton of time. So long story short, the vast majority of these conversations are going to center around the high school athlete, primarily a field-based athlete. And most of the time, I'm going to be touching base towards a 60-yard dash and how to improve that, especially for the baseball guys out there. So again, kind of going back to the top, the athlete type up here for sprint mechanics, you're looking at a high school baseball athlete with 2+ years of training experience. He plays the middle infield. He's a righty-righty, right? Good little athlete. We can go over his metrics later, or if you guys want to know, just let me know. I can give you more context there. And what we're trying to do is, number one, he wants to drop his 60-yard dash time. And the context there is when you're training to improve a time, it's going to look a little different than when you're training to improve, I would call it game speed or game sprint mechanics. So kind of coming back to the 60-yard dash, the 60-yard dash for a baseball guy I find very interesting and intriguing because as a lot of you baseball guys know out there, you're never running in a 60-yard straight line ever in your sport. So the biggest, punchback or counter I get to, athletes who don't really prioritize their 60-yard dash is we never do it in the sport. It's not that important. And so what if I run a 7-1 versus a 7-0? Like my field work, my hitting, my defense, whatever. I can get by on that. And I agree, like the 60-yard dash for a baseball player at large is not the most valuable metric you can see, right? But that doesn't mean it's not important, because if it's something that you're going to get recruited based off of and you have to train to improve, not a lot of guys can just walk out the door and run a sub 760, with no real training experience. It takes a lot of effort and discipline to build that. So along the way, while the 60-yard dash may not be the most crucial training or the crucial outcome that we're searching for in an elite baseball player, it is a tool that can be used to develop the other phases of sprints and therefore improve your ability to accelerate, get to a higher top end speed threshold. And then that in itself will improve your neurological output or your neuro output, where the connections between your brain and your muscles are that much more effective, that much more efficient. The connection between the muscles within themselves, they know how to work with each other. They're not so restrictive. So a lot of your mobility issues or your restrictions starts to go away, because if you have those restrictions, either you're a really good compensator or you worked your way out of them by being a better runner, right? Running is one of the most natural things that humans can do. So without going down that rabbit hole, to circle back to our high school baseball athlete here, middle infielder, this is going to be a video of his 10-yard fly at total performance. Now, this is a 0 to 20 segment. We track the last 10 yards and we compare it to the first 10 yards. A lot of you coaches out there know about this split. A lot of you sprinters out there know about this split. So for me, this is going to be mid to late accel. And for Mr. Lou here, as we're looking through his tape, this is, I believe, from, February. So, just late off season, about to get into the preseason mode for high school, right? We've made a lot of progress for Lou in the sense that we're trying to improve his ability to leverage his hips, to tap into the power that he has at his size and his frame, because what he likes to do is he likes to rely on his knees and kind of stay more bent as far as the knee level and down. And that's going to lead to a lot of, steps that aren't really being utilized to take full advantage of the power and the strength that the kid has developed, because he's just being a little inefficient on the ground. Now, when you're looking at Lou here coming through and this green turf starts the 10-yard segment, you can see the blue laser right there on his right leg, right? So we're going to be looking at, let's count his steps here. We got his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going our 6 to 7 step, and then we're going to be working out from there. So coming into his 7th step here, he's landing right foot. Now, for Lou, like I was telling you a second ago, one of his biggest issues is he loves to use his knees to produce his power and speed for him, right? But that's going to lead to a lot of lost velocity at the limb because of how much bending and folding you have to do, and that limits the amount of velocity at the limb that you're able to generate. So when you hit the ground, ideally you want to be in front of the hip, right? A few inches in front of the hip, which we got, right? Hips back here. Let me use a different color. We'll use green, because why not? Hips back here, right? Foot's about to make contact in front. We're good there. At this point of the sprint, looking good, at least as far as where his foot's hitting, right? As we go forward a tick, he makes contact. All right, we're pretty on time with the swing leg and the stance leg. The swing leg being the leg that's in the air, and the stance leg being the one that is on the ground. Now, when I say on time, that means by the time this foot hits the ground, we're pretty much knee side by side or arms down side by side. You can't see the away side arm. Head's getting forward, right? Back leg is nice and bent, swinging through. So timing wise, as far as when he should have picked up his foot to get to this step, we're looking pretty good so far. However, at the 10-yard segment back here, he should be starting to stand up and start to transition into the next phase of his sprint. So when you stay in a squatted position, especially at the knees and down, that's going to keep your center of mass a little lower as far as from the waistline and down. So for a guy like you, or for a guy like Lou, when he's forced to try to stay low at the waist and down, his upper body is going to have to do something to keep him from dropping too far down and really turn it into like almost like a duck walk, right? A squatty walk for my TV guys out there, right? At that point, we don't want to be here at that point, right? So what that does is as he moves through the ground, or I should say over his foot, it's going to delay and weaken the amount of pressure that he's going to feel at the foot. So when the heel starts to lift off the ground, this foot being so loosey-goosey, let me clear, this foot being on the looser side of the spectrum as far as when it hits the ground, that's not going to give the Achilles and the calf region a solid enough anchor to really feel supported, to kind of stiffen up and set and then rebound that energy into the next step. So you're going to see here frame by frame as he hits ground, foot's going to start to flatten out. And as the knee starts to pitch forward, the heel is not going to match the speed lifting, and you're going to create a little bit of a stretch here down at the Achilles region. Now, not the end of the world for a guy like Lou, because we're starting to work out of it. And when he was younger and weaker, this is something that I would see all the time. Now, as he started to get faster, without me doing too much specifically for the ankle, his ankle started to adapt and change. He started to get a little bit more rigid and be able to be compliant in a quick manner instead of being so mushy. So again, all within context as far as what you're trying to chase. But in the general mechanic, what you're looking for is a more sturdy anchor with the floor. That's going to give your body more pressure, and it's going to give you subconsciously a safer position to land and then pivot over the top. If you don't know what I'm saying, I mean, like if you're running on ice and you have no friction whatsoever, where are you going to go, right? You're going nowhere. So the closer we get to set, the more, as the sprint gurus like to say, the more force you're getting up from the ground, right? The better you're using your energy. So that's number one. What that does, number two, up top, right? That's going to prevent this knee from ever really being given the opportunity, and this is earlier in the sprint, to start to decrease the level of pitch or drop you'll see at the shin as he goes from step to step. So early, first step, you're thinking, wham, you're getting downhill. And the next step you take when you wind up and land, you might drop, an inch or so less than that. And the next step after that, it gradually starts to pick up, and you see less of a degree of change at the shin. When you see this amount of shin angle change later half of the sprint, 10 yards and beyond, you know that your athlete or yourself is losing some of that power that you're trying to tap into, having to spend more time on the ground and delaying your next step. So when it's forced to stay low, now we know that the velocity is going to be hampered. It's not going to pick up enough speed. And the only way to keep going is either A, run faster, which at this point he's probably at 85, definitely 85 or more or so percent at his top speed potential. Baseball guy, even with his training experience, is not going to be tapping out around 40 or 50 yards. He's a high school kid. He's going to tap out around 25 to 30 on his best days. So he's 10 yards in and he's already pretty close to that, right? So if he's already there and his lower body, knees and below are still treating this like accel, it's limiting the velocity to the limb. And to offset that, you'll see big picture that the arms and the upper body, waist and above, have to offset what the lower body's doing. So usually when you see more of that squatted position at the knee and below, the upper body's going to try to do its part to try to keep some weight up. So you'll see a higher arm swing, a more upward arm swing, instead of trying to carry the body forward and lead with the torso, right? He's trying to stay in control. So to do that, he's going to start to pick his arms up a little bit more in the up direction, right? And again, Lou's made progress on this. This doesn't look terrible. We're nitpicking right now to highlight some of the inefficiencies that they could be adding, a couple hundredths of a second, if not more, maybe even up to a tenth or a tenth and a half to a 60-yard dash, especially if you're not used to running 60s, right? This is how you peak early, and you have to carry all that speed that much longer, right? So anyway, trying to keep the upper half up while fighting with the lower half trying to stay down. Now you'll start to see the reciprocating foot, or I should say the opposite foot, have to kind of offset that delayed action from the right side. It's going to slow down the amount of velocity. It's going to really, what's the best way to put this? It's going to hit the brakes harder than it's going to hit the brakes softer than it should. you should be able to get a whip and catch, and it should be able to set and get down. But when the back leg side is being delayed by whatever mechanism, in this case probably the soft foot contact, the speed of that shin ain't going to carry that much all too often. So the body's never have to adapt to that leg carrying out with some speed. So now it's going to slow down earlier, and then let's watch what happens when he hits the ground. It's going to hit pretty much flush and flat, right? I've been using a cue lately, like if there's a soccer ball in front of his foot, when you make impact, essentially, maybe some coaches will nitpick this a little bit. For athletes, it's worked very well. You try to spin that ball backwards, right? So you try to create a little backspin on the ball as you get that foot to the ground. You don't want to try to pop the ball right on the top of the center. That's how you make a hard collision. That generates a soft anchor because your foot's so much on the floor. And you don't want to kick the ball by dropping your foot down too early and hitting the toe as you make impact with the floor, right? Or the turf or whatever. So for here, we got a case of this is improvement because Lou used to be kicking his foot towards the soccer ball instead of at least getting on top of it. So not all reps. Lou, if you're watching this, I hope you're not, hating me right now. I'm not trying to tear you apart. You've made a lot of progress. Like I said, this is just highlighting some of the nuances that you really don't get to pick up on if you don't watch this stuff 24/7, or if you don't talk about it or coach it all the time. And just to kind of wrap up on Lou here, because I don't want to do this for 10 hours. If you guys know me, you know I like to talk a lot. Just to wrap up on Lou, I just want to highlight something here as far as what a pretty picture looks like, right? If you guys have been in the speed coaching world, or if you're an athlete that's been researching how to sprint faster, at some point or another, you've seen a picture of an athlete in triple extension on the backside, arms nice and pretty, working in opposite directions, front side hips here at 90, prepared to hammer the ground. And we get a lot of our coaching cues from that. Now, I'm not going to be a coach that wants to tear anybody down. I don't want to do it. It's pointless. It's irrelevant. But I will say that when I came up as far as learning about sprint mechanics and learning how to train athletes to run faster, yes, early it's easy. As they get more advanced, it gets more difficult. Is that when I worked off a philosophy where we're trying to chase more of a muscular-driven, force-driven, hard impact, push, triple extension, jump out of the line, any type of cueage or drills that kind of fit into that category, I saw a lot more overuse injury. I saw a lot more soft tissues pop up, as far as everything from a hamstring to a hip flexor to, kind of the nagging, reoccurring overuse type of shin splints and things like that. Feet would get sore and beat up. The weight room honestly probably worked a little better. They were probably a little bit more efficient as far as like matching the necessity or matching the need for energy, because when you're just barking at the athlete all day to go, push, then you carry that to the weight room. It works out pretty nice. But on the track or on the turf, it's a lot of unnecessary collisions that doesn't teach the athlete when or how, right? Maybe they don't want to know the why. That's fine. I love to know the why. But the when or how, just like swinging a golf club or swinging a bat or ripping a shot in lacrosse or any skill component, shooting a free throw, any skill component to a sport, sprinting is the same. There's a technique to it. And if all you do is push, you will go faster, especially if you're a zero that's never done it before. You will get faster. Don't get me wrong. But the thing where it comes short as far as that type of vernacular is it doesn't say or teach the when or the how. And it doesn't show you what happens if you go too far, right? So to bring it back to Lou one more time, this pretty picture, this is not what I want to see for a guy like Lou at this point in his sprint, really ever, right? I don't want to see this. This means we're floating. This means we're relying on the knee too much. That means we're trying to pop up instead of stay on the ground and go. Stay on the ground and get to the next foot, right? That means our switches are going to be delayed. And if they're not delayed, like this guy is right here, that means we're compensating somewhere else and we're probably staying too high. You see this big delay here in the switch. That only means that he can take as long as he wants because he's really close to topping out on his speed. When in reality, he has potential to go so much faster if we're able to get him up just a little bit more in that knee and above, in that knee and below, stiffen up that lower half, right? Just a little bit, make it more compliant, right? Compliant in the sense of listening when you tell it what to do. So we get delayed, we land flat once again. We're gonna throw off the timing of that lift. We're gonna continue just to roll that knee downhill deeper than it needs to be. We're gonna fight to keep the upper body up while we're trying to keep the knees and below down. And now that I'm seeing it from the side, one more point, you're gonna see this high heel recovery at a speed that it should not be happening for. He's trying to get his leg up off the ground. Then last note about this, he's trying to get his leg up off the ground because this down leg is staying too close to the ground at this speed. If he doesn't, he's going to trip and fall. So that wraps up episode 1 of Sprint Mechanics. Again, I'm Nate Garcia, Coach Nate. You can see me on Coach Nate G on Instagram, TP_strength on Instagram, TP_strength on YouTube. If you have questions, you can DM me or email me at nate@tpstrength.com. I run TP Speed. We're starting the next semester on May 18th. I will start coaching TP Speed again on May 26th, if not just a little bit later. And we'll be diving into how to get faster and how to get these athletes moving and how to make sure people stay injury-free and how to pair that with the weight room. So if you're a coach and you want to hop on and talk shop and figure out how to make these athletes better, welcome aboard. If you're an athlete that wants to use this, how to get faster, I hope you stay around because this can get deep. And if you're interested, you'll learn a lot. I'll talk to you later.